One of my presents this Christmas happened to be Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, Bethesda's foray into the immersive sim genre. And while my channel may not be dedicated to video game content, let me know in the comments if that's something you'd be interested in seeing from me. It got me thinking about Indiana Jones as a character. So I put down the controller, picked up the remote, and settled in to watch the first and best of the Indy movies, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Now, if you happen to be a movie nerd like myself, you probably know that Indiana Jones, just like Star Wars, was conceived by George Lucas as a love letter to the old school serial shows of the 40s and 50s, Flash Gordon, The Shadow, Dick Tracy, and the like. It was an era in filmmaking where the men were men, the women were women, and the bad guy was bad just for the hell of it. There was no such thing as morally gray, and the good guy always came out on top. In the main, Raiders perfectly captures this sort of storytelling by pitting Dr. Jones against the Nazi war machine in a race against time to capture a powerful artifact that could change the course of the war. However, if we pull back a single layer of this story, we find that our eponymous hero is actually little better than the enemies, like Belloc, that he's fighting. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that there's some hidden subtext here that turns Indiana Jones into a Nazi, but what I am saying is that his search for the Ark of the Covenant isn't as righteous as one would initially think. In the opening sequence of Raiders, we're thrown into the tail end of one of Indy's expeditions, following him and a small team into the jungles of Peru as he searches for a lost idol. There's blood, betrayal, booby traps, and boulders as Indy finds the object of his search and attempts to secure it. Then we're introduced to Rene Belloc, Indy's rival and presumed equal in the field of archaeology. He steals the idol from Indy, who, let's be honest here, stole it himself, and forces Jones to run for his life. The story cleverly sets Belloc up as the other side of Indy's coin, the man Indy could become if his personal morals and ethics suddenly disappeared.
I am a shadowy reflection of you. It'll take only a nudge to make you like me, to push you out of the light.
I submit to you the following. Rene Belloc and Indiana Jones are already the same person. The only difference is perspective. In the next sequence, Indy states disgustedly that Belloc has most likely already sold the idol, and Indy intends to go after it. How does he plan to fund this trip, you ask? By selling other trinkets he'd collected on the expedition to his friend Marcus, curator of the National Museum and its satellites, who doesn't look too closely into how these artifacts were acquired.
Want to hear about it? Not at all. I'm sure everything you do for the museum conforms to the International Treaty for the Protection of Antiquities. Yes, the museum will buy them as usual, no questions asked. Yes, they are nice.
Indiana Jones, by his own admission, is every bit the grave-robbing archaeophile that Belloc is. Both men find important historical artifacts and whisk them away from their countries of origin. Both men are paid to do it, and the only difference is that Indy's wind up in a glass case, whereas Belloc's find their way into private collections. Jones has no moral high ground to stand on when he confronts Belloc later in the movie. This is not to say that he's an anti-hero or a villain per se. It's just a comment on the fact that, as always, right and wrong can very often come down to a matter of perspective. This take on the stereotypical serial-type hero is actually much more nuanced than I think the screenwriter, Lawrence Kasdan, had originally intended it to be. Indiana Jones is not the infallible warrior fighting for truth, justice, and the American way. On the contrary, as we've seen, he's actually a bit of a hypocrite. But his hypocritical ethics do not preclude Indy from being a hero altogether. His final objective is to display the Ark in Marcus's museum, not use it to take over the world as the Nazi. Delving further, we can see that he's actually profoundly naive when it comes to the end result of his search. He legitimately thought that once he'd recovered the Ark, he'd be able to keep it, or at least be on the team that studied it. Taken at face value, these kinds of mistakes can be viewed as weakness of character, but it's exactly because he makes them that he is so compelling. After all, he's only human. Taking a step back from Indy, we can see that this technique of using nuance has been a staple in Hollywood, almost since its inception, resulting in well-written characters that are every bit as compelling as he is. That being said, when such nuance is the end goal, rather than a byproduct of the writing, it actually detracts from the full sum of a character, ironically making them less compelling. To explain what I mean, I want to take a look at one of Disney's earliest live-action adaptations, Maleficent. In her original animated appearance, Maleficent was evil for evil's sake. She'd been snubbed at Aurora's christening and therefore cursed the girl to die on her 16th birthday. Pretty clear cut, right? She was so brilliant a character, in fact, that in her brief on-screen appearances in that movie, Maleficent went down as one of the best Disney villains of all time. Her legacy was secured, even if Aurora herself never really achieved the heights of popularity that Cinderella and Snow White did. Fast forward to 2014, and Disney releases Maleficent, a live-action retelling of their 1959 animated film. In this version, Maleficent is transformed from horrid villain into a misunderstood anti-hero who was unjustly wronged. The movie itself was decent enough, but by trying to add the same kind of nuance to the character that we see in Indiana Jones, it actually diminishes who and what Maleficent was. She didn't need to be relatable. She didn't need to be seen as fallible. She was already perfect exactly as she was. Now, I'm not here to shit on that movie. If you enjoyed it, more power to you. I'm merely commenting on the fact that intentionally striving to make a character relatable can, at times, make them much less interesting. To provide another example, one need look no further than Disney's Cruella, a prequel of sorts to the animated staple 101 Dalmatians. Instead of the utterly insane fashionista that has become iconic, she's turned into a traumatized 20-something, out to avenge the death of her mother. This can also be seen in both Moana and Big Hero 6, where the villains are pursuing their brand of destructive justice against someone who has genuinely wronged them. Anyway, let's get back to Indy. After all this talk about nuance and fallibility as an intentional end state, I think it's important to contrast what can happen if you shift too far in the other direction, i.e. when you turn your character into a Mary Sue. If you don't know, the term Mary Sue is meant to evoke the kind of lazily written character that can do everything, learn anything, and act perfectly in every situation. It's a term meant to evoke the kind of self-insert character most often originally found in fanfiction, who can do no wrong and is instantly able to overcome any challenge, regardless of what it is. All of this is simply to say that the idea of the Mary Sue is the antithesis of Indiana Jones. Or at least it should be. In playing the Great Circle, I came across a frustrating phenomenon, that being that I wasn't connecting with Indy as I had when I watched the original trilogy. It wasn't an immediate feeling, nor was it one that I'd been able to put words to, even after several long play sessions. But after I re-watched Raiders, I finally understood why this version felt so hollow. It's because they'd turned Indiana Jones into a Mary Sue. Now, I understand that these issues can be dismissed as necessary to facilitate proper gameplay, and to an extent, I'd agree. However, this doesn't change the fact that they do exist. On its face, the Great Circle is just another indie adventure. There's exotic locations, ancient artifacts, secret societies, gunplay, and romance, with enough of each to fill out an indie movie 3 times over. And that's the crux of the issue. They do it 3 times over. Each of the game's 3 hub worlds feels like it could have been a movie unto itself, and Indy would have gone home at the end, battered and bruised, but ultimately successful. The narrative that Bethesda built was too big for the Indiana Jones of the movies, so they had to blow up Indy to fit. It's like they took his description of Marcus in The Last Crusade and decided that's what they were going to go with.
Brody's got friends in every town and village from here to the Sudan. He speaks a dozen languages, knows every local custom. He'll blend in, disappear. You'll never see him again.
Everywhere he goes, he speaks the language, knows local ancient history better than the people who live there, and can disguise himself as everything from an Egyptian digger to an Italian fascist. He can even learn, on the fly mind you, what the game tells us is the most ancient written language in the world, and speak it with some degree of fluency. Now, again, I completely understand that most of these complaints are in service to the gameplay experience that Bethesda wanted to give us, but that doesn't change the fact that this Indy doesn't feel like Indy to me. He feels like the product of a superfan's spec script. I wanted to love this game. I really did. And there's a lot here to love. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether the character is male, female, or an alien from another world. A Mary Sue is a Mary Sue is a Mary Sue. Indiana Jones is a teacher and an archaeologist, and admittedly a soldier from World War I, but that's only if you take the TV show into account. He's strong, but not invincible. He's intelligent, but not infallible. He's a hero, but not a god. And unfortunately, these are distinctions that most writers in Hollywood and beyond seem to have forgotten. Someone doesn't have to be perfect to be compelling, and having flaws doesn't diminish them as a character. Anyway, that's all I've got for you this time, so if you could do me a favor and hit the like and subscribe buttons, I'd really appreciate it. Every little bit helps me out. Also, go ahead and check out the other videos on my channel, or hit up my website to see my blog and maybe buy one of my books on Amazon. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.